Welcome to Mastering Your Practice Metrics. I'm here with my assistant extraordinaire, Jessica, who will be continuing to let people in as we do this. I do have something I want to share with you. It's called the Simple Financial Dashboard that I'm going to share in a few minutes that we will be using. So you won't have to do any tricks or anything like that. We're just going to put it into the chat and you can just download it and follow me as I describe some of the key metrics that I look at, and I'm going to give you my perspective of what exactly I'm looking at. We can go into troubleshooting different metrics and all sorts of things. And then, of course, at the end, you know, we can dive into more asking questions. And I do have something that I want to share with you at the end. So be sure you hang out. It'll be something that I think you'll want. So this idea of if you are unmuted, please mute yourself just because sometimes the background noise can be a little disrupting for everyone. But this idea of metrics, you know, why do we have metrics? What is it about metrics that we need for our business? What is it about metrics that we don't like? I know, speaking personally, metrics have never been my thing. I've never really attracted, if you use that word, attracted to metrics when I had my practices and ran my practices. The only metric I really tracked was what Mike 𝐒𝐿𝐽𝐻 now famously refers to as bank balance accounting. For those of you that don't know, Mike 𝐒𝐿𝐽𝐻 wrote several books. One of them is Profit First. But he called it bank balance accounting. I didn't realize what that was, but I think we all do it, right? At one point or another, we open up an account of our business, and if there's money in it, we smile. And if there's no money in it, we are in a bad mood. And my mood would change day to day, sometimes hour to hour, because that's how I was tracking the success of my business, whether there was money and deposits in there. 3 payroll month, bad mood, Jamey. 2 payroll month with a lot of money that was coming in, especially maybe from old accounts or some lawyers that finally settled cases. Oh, happy Jamey. But of course, we all are smarter than that, and we all know that that is not the way to build a business. What metrics do is metrics are facts. Now, they're facts if the information you're getting is true. Garbage in, garbage out. If your metrics, if your reporting is not accurate, then you can make bad decisions based on poor information. But assuming your metrics are accurate, and with so many fancy EMRs out there with a lot of reporting stuff, it should be, I see the word should, then metrics are facts. Now, for me, sometimes it was a little bit of an ego blow to know what my metrics were. Like, did I really want to know my cancellation rate? Did I really want to know my profit margin? Did I really want to know my utilization? I knew I should know that stuff, but part of me, I didn't want to know. I already feel overwhelmed and I feel stressed and I'm doing everything I can to build this darn business to help people, darn it. And it was a little, sometimes too much of a blow, like, I don't want to see how bad I'm doing. But what I realized is, well, Jamey, that was the wrong phrase to put it in. You know, metrics is a history lesson, especially for the metrics that we refer to as lag indicators. In other words, they have already happened. Versus a lead indicator is something that could predict something. So when we look at our metrics, we're looking at how something was done. So for example, if we're looking at cancellations, cancellation is, well, how many people canceled, and if you have a policy that says and did not reschedule the same day or in the same week, then it's a cancellation. So what does a cancellation really represent? It represents how you are implementing some of the systems that avoid cancellations. So it's giving result of how you're doing. It's just like your grade in school. Your grade in school is the result of so many different things that you're doing. It's not just one thing. And I think it's important for us as we go through some of these metrics that you look at it not from an emotional standpoint. I know it's really difficult because we are emotional beings, but to operate your business in a high level emotional capacity will cause us to make poor decisions. And as business owners, one of our core functions, our core roles, is to make good decisions, or at least the best decision that we can with the information that we have at the time. So, Jessica, go ahead and give people access to our simple financial dashboard. And when I say the word simple, I do mean simple. This is something that I created over the years, but I created close to 20 years ago because you know what? There was just so many darn reports and EMRs and all stuff. I just get confused with all this stuff. Some of the reporting was not the way I defined a cancellation, for example, or a new patient. It was the way that the people that designed the EMR stuff did. And I also found it frustrating um, clicking on like 20 different reports. I think now it's almost worse because I think so many of these EMRs have gotten even so much technologically advanced that there's so many reports that it's like, I don't need 50 million metrics here. I just need a simple picture of how my business is doing. Then I can dive into more specifics. So that's the essence of and the premise of the dashboard. Let me go ahead and bring it up here. So here it is. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Let me make sure that there's no questions before we begin. Okay. So here is the simple financial dashboard. By the way, it's totally customizable. What I've done is I put in all of the coding and the formulas and stuff like that. But you can certainly, like clients of ours, completely customize this to make it fit you. But it does have, if you're a practice owner, it does have more or less the metrics that you need. Some of them might be slightly off that you can change. So simply we start with the clinic name, obviously you as the owner, and the year. At the see that there's tabs. You can put the years down here, or if you'd like, and actually what I recommend is I would put it year over year over year, back to back to back on the same tab. It makes it easier to then look and compare different years and different time frames. Um, so I want to just kind of show you a couple of key things. First of all, the way I look at a business is I look at a business from an operational standpoint and a financial standpoint. So on the left side here, you got your location. If you have more than one, you can have multiple locations there. The month, and we're looking at this dashboard from a monthly standpoint. Can you do it weekly? You can. The challenge of doing it weekly, I found, have to be broken down to daily, and then it would be the number of days in the week. I didn't want to do all of that work. Your EMR might be able to do that, but I like looking at things from a business standpoint, from a monthly view. But there are certain things, certain metrics you're going to want to look at from a weekly review. So let's get into a couple of the key metrics here. Referrals. For the longest time, I never put referrals on here. And what I realized is as I was working and coaching with clients, and I've been coaching clients and helping them build and grow their businesses for 11 years now, sometimes people were doing all the right things to generate new patients, but yet the new patient mark, their metric wasn't increasing. And as I help dive in with them and looking at their metrics, what does your referrals look like? And sometimes the referrals were low, which means there's only so many new patients you can get when your referrals were low. But what's interesting, other times referrals were high, yet new patients were still low. So referrals became a really important metric, and it's something that you absolutely want to track. In my 11 years of coaching, literally hundreds of practice owners from all different disciplines, physical therapy, mental health, pediatrics, SLPs, so on. What I found that a good number, I don't know what the heck a good number is, but well more than 50%, if not more than 70%, do not track referrals. They track new patients or new clients, but not referrals. So I highly recommend tracking referral. Here's how I define it. Everyone who contacts your company, as long as we have two bits of information. One, who is it? And two, do we have an ability to contact them? For instance, do we have a name and an email? If we have a name and an email, then they are, well, let me go back. I don't want to confuse anyone. There are leads and there are referrals. A lead is anyone that you have their, let's say, their email address. That would be a lead. A referral is anyone that contacts your office, either through your website, either through calling you. Well, those are probably two of the ways that they're going to get there, or they can walk in. That's a referral. A referral is a potential client or a potential patient. A lead, and I do not have leads on here, you could certainly add leads. A lead would be a person that could potentially be a client or a patient at some point. A referral is they're a warm lead. They've already contacted you. And then, of course, we have a new patient or a new client. That is someone who actually has paid you, either going through insurance or what have you. They have paid you. Another metric that is really telling is conversion rate. I love percentages because percentages get us out of the details of the specific number and give us more of a comparison. So the conversion rate in this case is, well, of the number of people that are contacting your office, well, how many are actually converting to new patients? Because saying you need more new patients, that might be the problem. Or the problem is, well, how many of the people that we should be getting in are we getting in? So this really focuses more on your conversion process, how you communicate, how you handle objections. When people talk about, kind of front desk, like overcoming your front desk and reducing, no-shows or cancellations, especially with brand new people, they're really first looking at your conversion rate. So that is a really critical metric that lets you know where the potential problem is. Just staying on here for a second, the way I view this with clients who, let's say, are like, hey, one of my goals is we need more visits. I'm like, okay, well, the number one way to get more visits is get more new patients. And the number one way to get more new patients is get more referrals. The real issue becomes, how do we increase or ramp up or develop new strategies of generating more referrals? But before we do that, we want to make sure our other process is working, such as, well, are we converting the percentage that we want to convert? As you can see, I put an example up here on row number 10. For my practice, we wanted to convert 90% of our referrals. You might be asking, Jamey, why 90%? And the answer is this: not every single person is going to be a qualified candidate. Sometimes a Medicaid person would call. There's no way we're going to convert them because we don't accept Medicaid. Or there'll be somebody that just has a ridiculous deductible that, are just not going to convert. So I choose 90%. Now, clients of mine, some have chose 80%. Some have chose clients as like, theirs is like 99%. Like literally every person that comes in is going to convert. So you as an owner, you get to choose what that number is. The best way to do it, in my opinion, is look at your past history. Your past history, when you're operating well, can give you at least some insight to that. And then at the end of the day, it's just make up a number, track it, and then you can go back and figure out whether you're on point or not. So that's referrals, conversions, and new patients. The next stat, and I don't track this stat on the dashboard, would be, but this is something that I have, so this is kind of a bonus stat for you guys. Tracking the number of plan of cares. Plan of cares. So I'll write that in right here. Plan of cares that actually get scheduled. This is important. This is an important stat. I don't have it on my main monthly, but it is an important stat, especially weekly stat, because you want to be sure that the people you're evaluating are, first of all, getting a clear plan of care, and second of all, scheduling that plan of care. When I see low visits, when I do an analysis, which at the end I'm going to give you an opportunity to get one. When I do a kind of a dashboard analysis, if I see low visits on someone's schedule, the first thing I'm asking them is check the plan of cares. Ask your front desk, do it for a week. How many of your new patients who come in, who are seen, actually have a plan of care and that plan of care is scheduled? I promise you this. If you do this, you'll up and your revenue will go with it. Guaranteed. I've never seen a business that if they are not capturing the plan of cares and putting them on the schedule, that their visits did not shoot up significantly. I experienced it myself, and it's a pretty wild phenomenon. And of course, it costs you nothing. What you do have to do is you have to dial in your SOP, which is your standard operating procedure. You have to dial that in to make sure that your process for doing plan of cares with your clinicians and your front desk is really working well. Another thing I want to share with you is the yellow is what you enter. The gray or the grayish blue is a formula. So cancellation percent, cancellation rate, some of you refer to it as arrival rate, really doesn't matter, your choice. Depending on the type of practice, it depends on what your target is. So these metrics are all nice and good, like the topics. Where I find people that do actually have metrics in place, where I find where they have trouble, is they don't actually have an ideal target or an expectation. So with each of the metrics that you have, what I would highly recommend is establishing what is your expectation, not what you hope to get or what you could get. It's what you expect to get. Because when you create expectations, and this is why any person that comes on board with Practice Freedom U, we are going to start very quickly with the dashboard. Because if you're not establishing very clear, then here's what I know. Then that means your staff isn't clear on what's expected of them. They're not clear on their objective metrics for their position, which means pretty much the only time they're ever going to hear from you is when they're doing something wrong, which they're not even sure what they're supposed to be doing in the first place, which creates a lot of problems. It can cause retention issues. Obviously, it's going to cause reduced productivity, reduced revenue, reduced profit. So that is a critical thing right there, is to make sure that you have targets. And if you have questions, please put them in there. I'm happy to answer some questions here. I'm just going to go through this a little bit more, then we can spend the rest of the time with specific questions. With cancellations on column H here, in my practice, it was 8%. National average, I guess the last time I heard maybe was 10 to 12 or maybe 11 to 12 in orthopedics. I know for my pediatric friends out there, you have educated me that that number is going to be more like 16, 17%, just because of the nature of the business. So it's basically whatever you want it to be that's within reason. Mine used to be 12 because that was the average. And then I said, well, that's the average. My place is better than average. We just are. So what are the higher places doing? What's the higher level practice doing? And I found out that they were doing 10% or 8% as their establishment or as their established target. So I said, there's no reason why we couldn't do that. So that's what we put down, and then we added in the process and the communication and everything else to achieve it, and we did. One thing I'll tell you as well, it's funny when you create an expectation. People tend to rise to the expectation that is given to them. If you expect nothing of people, they won't give you anything. But if you expect more, they'll give you more. I'm sure there's some law and research that will give you the psychology behind it, but it's 100% true, at least in my experience. So it doesn't mean you randomly come up with some target and you say, hey, do this, and I'm making you rise to the occasion. But it does mean that just because it's an average doesn't mean it's a best practice. And I resist looking at benchmarks and national averages because I'm not trying to compare myself to national averages. I'm comparing myself to how good we can be and where I view myself and my business. Because if I view my Ritz-Carlton, the hotel chain, I'm going to look at things and expect things that are different than another owner that views their business as the Motel 6. There's nothing wrong with the Motel 6. It's a multi-million, bazillion-dollar chain. But the decisions that are made are very different in a Motel 6 about their branding and their expectations and their training than it is about the Ritz-Carlton. So this is just a Jamey personal view. Just be mindful of the averages that you get out there, and be more clear about what you want and what you expect from your business. And maybe, it's okay sometimes to compare as long as it's healthy, comparing yourself to other people that are in your level and your standards. What are they doing versus just getting a average of 20 or 30,000 practices that are in some study or something like that. All right, finishing up the operational data here. Visits to per new patient. That's just a formula. Basically, it's the number of visits divided by the number of new patients. Total capacity, this is an important metric. And it's one that sometimes my clients get confused on. The total capacity is the total number of visits you could see with the amount of staff that you have if every single patient slot was filled. In other words, let's say you're scheduling on 30 minutes. It doesn't mean the patient's only there for 30 minutes, but let's say you're scheduling on 30 minutes, but you don't schedule before lunch and you don't schedule a half hour before the end of the day. So you would be able to see in an 8-hour day, even if you work 10 hours or 4 hours, but in an 8-hour day, that's 14 visits. Why? Because there's patient slots available. Now, that number 14 goes right here in J28. This allows this dashboard to know that it's 14, and I have a little thing there that says enter total number of visits if every slot was full that a therapist can treat in an 8-hour day. We need 8 hours because it's the normalization. It doesn't matter if you do more or less than that, but it's going to help the formula. And then we have to figure out the total number of work days. This is critical because there's different number of days in a month. So, for instance, we're in January. Total number of work days, let's say Monday is a holiday, we forget Monday. Let's say you're closed Martin Luther King Day. So we got 4 days this week, 5 days, that's 9, plus 4, that's 13, plus 5, that's 18, 19, 21. That would be 21 days in the month of January that were open. Now, before you say, well, but I'm open some Saturdays. For this purpose, do not worry about Saturdays. It will all be normalized in this data. But what if some people can't get to work because it snows? It is still a work day. The way I do it is the only time it is not considered a work day is if you, the owner, close the company or close the location down, like for a holiday or if there's 2 feet of snow and you can't get there. If people are on vacation or you partially closed or whatever, or people couldn't get in, just make a note of it. Just say, we had 2 people off on vacation this week. What that does, if your numbers are low, it gives you a reason why. But what you don't want to do, which I've seen way too often, is manipulate the numbers. If you manipulate these numbers to make them favorable, which is typically what people do, then you might as well not use the dashboard. You want consistency. You want facts. And if you're manipulating them, you're not getting the facts. If you have questions on that, shoot the questions in the chat and I'll get to them in a second. All right, FTEs. FTE stands for full-time equivalent. This is someone that's based on a 40-hour work week. Now, for my outpatient orthopedic type of people, typically you are paying that staff person for 40 hours. And that is a 1F, which means they could see, if fully booked on every slot, 14 people per 8-hour day times 5, which is 70 visits. That's their capacity. So now you have to determine, but what is expected of them? Because if you expect 70 visits a week, you're going to burn them out and they're not going to work for you much longer. That's not reasonable or realistic. So what is your expectations? I can give you what ours was for my business for 15 plus years. It was 85%. Jamey, how did you get 85%? Well, simple. First, I looked at it from a employee point of view. I had 2 points of view, the business and the employees. And I said, what would be a reasonable number for my employees to see based on how we do things? We did 1 every half-hour schedule. We had 1 hour booked for a new client. We had Medicare 1 hour booked. And I said, I think 85% or 60 visits would be reasonable. That's what I said to myself. Then I said, well, does this make sense revenue-wise and money-wise? So then I went over to the business side of things. I said, okay, let's say we make $600 or $100 a visit. 60 visits times 100 is 6,000 times 4 weeks per se. Granted, sometimes there's more days in a month than just 20. And I said, okay, that's 24,000. That is significantly more than what I'm paying them. I like to use a 3 multiple. So if you pay someone $7,000 a month, you want to get at least 21,000 in collections back. That's what I mean by 3 multiple. And work out. So I ran it by my team. They were okay with it. And then we created the SOPs and the training to help them achieve it. That's how I came up with the metric. Now, some people have metrics of 90%. Like if you're in New York, you're probably going to have a higher expectation, and your 14 per hour day is going to be higher as well. If you're doing 1 hour, 1 patient per hour, then your 14 would go down to 8, and then you would figure out your expectation from there. I'm going to kind of pause right there get back on the screen here. Any questions so far with the key operational metrics, how I look at things and stuff? Any questions? Am I losing you all? Does it make sense? Talk to me. And you can go ahead and just unmute yourself. Trying to give you as much as I can. This is being recorded, so you'll get the recording this afternoon when it's sent to you.
Jamey, I think it makes sense. The one thing that you said that if you can review, because I kind of almost heard you, I thought I heard you say contradictory things, but say you have to close the clinic because of weather. Do you count that as a work day? Because you've actually closed the clinic, but like I count it as a work day because it was a lost work day.
If you had to close the clinic, if you chose to close the clinic, then it's impossible for someone to treat patients. It's like you chose to close for a holiday.
A holiday, I count holiday, I take holidays out of the number of work days, but like a unexpected snow day where it's a blizzard and I didn't anticipate closing it, I still count that as a work day because it impacted our ability to generate revenue.
Well, Nancy, I'm not saying you can't do that.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm just trying to understand how you do it and why.
Yeah. So the way I did it is if I choose to close the office, I do not count it as a work day. Let's say it's a, you know, I live in an area where the government's always doing, well, it's up to you. You show up if you can, if you don't. If it's one of those partially closed, like, you know what, you might live in an area that you can't get here. If that's the case, you know, the SOP is let's try to move your patients to other people or do them online or whatever the thing is. But if you can't come in, so be it. I do not a half a day there or something like that. It's an open day. But I just made the decision that if I choose to close the clinic, I'm not going to count that against the metrics in the clinic. So if it goes from 21 days to 20 days, yes, it may, quote, artificially affect your number. So to your point, you could keep it as 21. It doesn't matter either way. I'm just telling you what I did. But as long as you're consistent with it, and as long as you're keeping notes, that's the key. The key is if let's say somebody screwed up with the PTO, and this happens often, someone screws up with the PTO and two people are off, and you have a small clinic, let's say you have, you know, 6, 7 therapists, 2 people off is like a third of your provider. You're not going to alter your FTE status. You're not going to alter your days. You're not going to alter anything. You're going to put a note. 2 therapists were off that week. And what you hope you find is you don't even know that the numbers were changed because your team did such a great job handling the overflow, or maybe you had a PRN that jumped in and stuff like that. Yeah. So does that answer your question, Nancy?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate
Personally,
it.
I would stay what you're doing because, hey, if it's working for you, that's
yeah, we make notations so that we can see if there's a drop, what happened.
Yeah.
So for instance, maybe a therapist called in sick or something, and we know when that happens, but I want to know what the total impact is on the clinic and what that did to us both financially and operationally.
Yeah, but I'll give you another, you know, old Jamey's reframe of how. Let's say that happened. Let's say that, you know, people were out or whatever, and you made a note of it, and you noticed a significant drop in visits, and then you noticed a few weeks later a drop in revenue. The way I look at it is, how can we improve this process? How can we be more clear of what happens when we have this situation versus, because so many of us are just so busy, we're just trying to survive the day, we just react to the problem. But we don't step away from it and say, well, this is going to happen. People are going to be off. People are going to be sick. Snow's going to happen. If you live in a snow state, hurricanes are going to happen. What is the way we want to handle it so then we can train everyone so we don't miss a beat? It won't be perfect necessarily, but it will help everyone work together to address this situation when it happens, and it will have a significantly effect on the bottom line. So that's the way I'm always looking at things, is I look at things as what is my staff trained to do and know to do, and what is the process that we're supposed to be following? That's where I focus. And what that does is help me stop attacking individuals, which is very easy to do. You
Oh,
tackle
yeah.
someone's character, you start making up stories in your head, they're not good, they don't care, versus you looking in the mirror and saying, look, what can we do better? Where can I help lead and direct my team?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't use the data to try to go after, like a therapist. People do get sick and stuff, but no, I just want to kind of know what's happening. It also allows me to, like, if there is someone who there's a consistent issue with, I do have that. But
Absolutely, and that's what you're doing this for. It's
mhm.
giving you data to be able to make decisions. You see, and everyone knows I'm a coach, and you're a part of our a program PFU, and there's a lot of people on here. What coaching does is coaching helps you think differently about the problems you have. It doesn't mean you're not going to have problems, because we as business owners, our job is to wake up every day and solve problems. But what happens in our business is we end up solving the same or very similar problems. When that's the case, you have nowhere to look but the mirror, because the decisions you're making, how you're communicating, is determining the result, not your team. I repeat, it's not your team. There's studies, there's research, there's a law out there called Deming, or there's a rule called Deming's rule. Just guy Ira Deming, who did a lot of research, that says 94%, it's also called the 94% rule, 94 problems in business are due to poor processes and systems, not individuals. Think about that. That means 94% of the problems that you're facing right now is not because of your staff. It's because of how we think and how we implement different processes and systems, and how we communicate that. That's all on us. So I digress. That is certainly for a different conversation. Christine had a question around FTEs. Christine, can you just ask your question specifically?
Yes, hi. So
Hello.
a lot of our therapists don't work 8 hours.
Mhm.
A lot of them are part-time or they work short days. And I was wondering, kind of like your reasoning behind adding this and the metrics. What is it that we're trying to gather by collecting the FTEs?
So the FTEs is a way to normalize your team. So instead of looking at your team as individual um, people with individual hours, it allows you to look at them if you have two part-time people, let's say each working 20 hours a week, that would be one FTE. So it allows you to look at your team as a productive unit versus individual. Again, this is a higher level view. So when I look at someone's business, I'm saying, well, how many FTEs do you have? And on average, how many visits could they see? And how many visits do you expect them to see? Within a minute, we can figure out very quickly this number under M. This is utilization. And this is probably my number one metric is utilization. Because most practices that I do any kind of analysis, their utilization is low. In other words, the money you're paying your staff, basically the money you're paying your FTEs, you're not getting the return on investment from them. Now, there's a lot of reasons why that could be happening. That would be troubleshooting specifically, but that is the bottom line. And if your utilization went up, your revenue and profit would go with it. And what's good about that is chances are it's not going to cost you much money to do that unless you have to put a lot of money in marketing. And that the reason is because you already have the staff that you're paying to do it. Does that make sense, Christine?
Yes. So
FTE is used for utilization purposes.
yes. So if I was supposed to work 20 hours a week, but if they only worked 10 hours, am I taking the,
Are you talking about paying them hourly?
I'm trying to see how I can get the FTEs.
Yeah, you bring up a really, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. You bring up a great question, and this is something that I've talked to a lot of people with, especially people that are in the hourly world, strictly hourly world. Like they work hourly, what they see is what they
Yes.
get paid for. And so it's a little more complicated because when I hired someone part-time, I still established the hours I wanted them to work. That was their FTE status. Now, if there's no patients there, I don't want them sitting around doing nothing. And they don't want to sit around and do nothing because sometimes I was paying them for that hour, and sometimes they weren't getting paid for that hour because they were only paid on what they see.
Mm-hmm.
With that, it's a little more challenging because you could do your FTE status after the month. You know, I said not to do that, but you could do it after the month because you're not even going to know what the FTE status is until the month is over because you're going to count the number of people they saw. But here's the problem with that. You're going to manipulate it where they are 100% capacity every time or 100% utilization. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be 100% every time. If they work 7 hours once a week or 15 hours once a week, if you're only counting after the fact, number of people they saw in that given hour, then the only result is going to be 100%. However, you could still be losing money.
Yeah.
What we really need them to do is we need to have them see 15 patients a week. What we've done with the hourly payment, what we've done is that's a strategy to minimize our exposure. See, when you do salary, your exposure is more because you're paying them no matter what. So there's pros and cons to that. When you're hourly, your exposure of what you're laying out money-wise is less, but there's pros and cons to that. So that would be something that I would dive in more to find more specifics. It's not just I'm not going to give you a do this or do that because I don't want to give you bad information that sends you down a bad path. That you would have to kind of look at that a little bit more because a lot of people that I've worked with changed their model, their treatment and payment model because of what you're just saying. They realized that their utilization was really high, but they weren't making any money. And it was because that hourly model, those people were not very productive. They didn't see more people than they had to see because they knew they were only going to get paid with the people that they saw, and they were okay with it. You needed them to see 20 people a week. They were seeing 10, and they were okay with it. They were getting paid for 10 hours, but you were losing money. So it's a different thing to dive into, and again, I'm happy to dive into that at another time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I think who is it? Silvina?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Hello. Hi, Jamie. I have a question about what you mentioned that is so important to have proper systems and processes in place in order to make things happen. So I wonder, how do you come up with a new system or process to have your contractors and employees follow a new SOP that they may push back, but it's what you need to make your metrics work, right? So, for example, we use the Jane app, and whenever they book an appointment and they cancel it to reschedule because the clinician made a mistake, it counts as a cancellation, right? So it messes up all our metrics, and that happens a lot. They ask to reschedule. So I wonder if you have any comments based on your experience, how to motivate people to follow new ways of doing things. If you share how this impacts the business, or in your experience, what's the best way to motivate them to get
Yeah.
on board with our new expectations?
Silvina, you bring up a great question, and it's something that I've actually have talked about a lot. How do you delegate? How do you create processes? How do you get buy-in? That's not the focus of today, and frankly, I would need significant more time because it's not a simple answer. And really, most of the stuff is not necessarily a simple answer because our businesses are more complicated. People are more complicated. Now, there's a way to do that, but what I would suggest is I have done talks, and if you want, go ahead and reach out to me, and I'll have Jessica, who's on the call, send you a couple of recordings of things that I did that will certainly give you some insight of actually how to communicate that, how to set the expectations. First of all, I'll tell you this: you can't motivate anybody, so don't try. You can't. All right, so don't do it. We have to be internally motivated. We can inspire people for a hot minute, but we can't motivate somebody. So it's really about making sure that we're finding people that have the right intangibles, right traits, that buy in and believe in the values of what we're doing, which means we as owners have to actually provide those to people. If not, they're not really sure what they're part of, and then your business becomes really just a place to come in and treat people and get paid, and it's no different than the place down the street. So there's more to it that helps people then want to be a part of this, and helping them have the tools and the way of doing it to be successful. So, but great question. But yeah, just reach out, Jessica, if you can grab Silvana's email. Happy to send you on that. Lots of questions coming in. Let me do this, because I know some people are going to have to leave. I'm happy to stay on a little longer if you are, to answer these questions, but I do want to make sure that we hit the other side of this. So as long as you're able to stay on, either way, I'm going to have the recording. So I'm going to answer the questions regardless. So we talked about utilization and how utilization is one of a critical number for your business, visits per day and all that. Okay, let's get into the right side here. The right side is the financial side. It's pretty straightforward. You have expenses and revenue. You also could put in billed charges, but expenses and revenue are key. Where do you get expenses and revenue? Your P&L statement, your profit loss statement. If you don't have an accurate profit loss statement, then get a good bookkeeper. Because if you're trying to do this yourself, this should be like the number one thing you delegate from your plate. If you have any questions, look for one of my videos and trainings. You can look on YouTube as well on delegation, because you should not be doing this. It's not what you do. I don't care how good you might think you are. It's worth every dollar having a professional do this, because you need to have very accurate expenses and very clear revenues. Once you have this, you can get some formulas going here, like revenue per visit. Pretty important to know what you're averaging on per visit and what you think you should be averaging. Sometimes this number starts to creep down. We don't even realize it. All of a sudden we see it here and we're like, why is that happening? And then you find that there's an issue with a billable charge or a code that people are doing that's not being reimbursed or something like that. Could you add units here? Yes, some of our clients add units. They'll just put in a column and they'll put units. Certainly something you could add. The area that I'm most interested in is this one, profit margin. Can't tell you how many times I've had a discovery call with a client, and I said, so give me, just in general, just on that, within 1 or 2%. What's your profit margin? Crickets. I don't get, they don't know. As business owners, it's your job to know. You have got to know what the profit margin is. Profit margin. Because the last thing you want to do is just work harder and harder and go through all of the stuff that we go through as business owners and not actually make the profit that you want. And, there's lots of different people will say lots of different things about what your profit margin should be. Every one of our clients, our goal is simply over 20%. If you look at the world out there, that's like the top 2% of all practices. And assuming you have a profitable treatment model, in other words, if you're only seeing one patient an hour and getting paid $60 in New York City, where you have to pay $90,000, $100,000 for a therapist, okay, that's not a profitable treatment model. Sorry, until you change that model, you're never going to be profitable. But assuming you have a profitable treatment model, which most of the people I talk to do have models, it's basically how well you run the business that produces the profit, right? So if you run a more efficient business, if you tighten up the things that we're talking about, if you yourself have a better understanding of your metrics, which then lead into understanding where some of the processes or systems are confusion, you can increase that profit margin quickly. Now, for every dollar that you're bringing in, you're taking home more of it, which is okay. That's what we want to do. You can deliver good care and you can make money. It's a win-win situation. At least that's how I look at it and work with our clients with. So being clear on profit margin, which is simply the percentage of what's left over after expenses, which is the money that costs to deliver care with the total money that was brought in. A very telling fact here. So there's the whole dashboard. At the bottom, you have a monthly averages, which I really find helpful. You have directions here. Play with it, have fun with it. Let me go back to some of the questions here. Might there be a recording of this? Yes, you'll get a recording a few hours from now. Can you share your reasons behind? I did that. Are you planning to share the spreadsheet with us? You should have a spreadsheet, Savannah. iPhone said, are the visits included just the visits for the new patient of that given month, or does it include visits for clients who just started the previous month? The formula is just a formula. The formula is just going to give you whatever the visits you put in there for the month divided by the number of new patients. So when you look at a month just by itself, it can give you some data that might be a little off. But when you look at, let's say, 3 months and you're able to start tracking trends, that's when you know something's up. So if I see a number in 1 month that doesn't look right, I'm going to do a little digging, but I may not freak out and start going crazy until I see a history of that. If I see a history of it, then I'll start doing something about it. But if I see a high cancellations because we had snow, I'm not going to worry about it. If I see high cancellations for another week or two and there's no snow, that's a system and execution problem. So Mr. or Mrs. iPhone, I hope that helps you. Let's see, message here from Reggie. How to create more lines in the monthly averages? To add lines, just add a column or add lines. I'm not an expert on this. I actually had someone create that, but you should be able to do it. The sheet is not protected. You can do whatever you want with it. Ask someone that's young and good with computers, Reg. Scott, interested in determining calculation of your 3-time multiple. Scott, any additional? I talked about the multiple. If you're still on, can you?
Yeah, I'm still on. That was a benchmark or metric that, and I'm familiar with 43 of them, unfortunately. That was one I hadn't heard or seen before. And I guess I was just curious on your calculation.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a relationship between volume and net revenue per visit, but I didn't know kind of exactly how you came to a 3 by.
Yeah, I learned it like to go, from smart people that knew numbers, and it's just one of those kind of quick little things that you could use. It's not exact. I know people that don't use the 3 multiple, but if you look at the amount of money you pay, forget the benefits and everything, just salary. So if it's 7,000 a month or 6,000 a month, you want to get a minimum of 3 times that back from their efforts, from their billables and collectibles. What that is, it's a general number that should cover your expenses, their salary plus your overhead, and still have a significant profit left over. Now, of course, you would have to do the specific calculations because sometimes those numbers don't work. Sometimes, like I know one of my clients is cash based. His multiple isn't 3, but he also does a level of overhead that an insurance practice would. So he doesn't have to be a 3 times multiple. He could be a 2.5 times multiple and still be wildly profitable, which he is. I think he's like at 28, 29% profit. So anyways, that's where it's just used as a guideline. It's really tough to get that 3.5, 4 nowadays. Reimbursements. I know people got to jump off probably to treat patients. I do want to offer this to you if you're not a current client of ours. I'm happy to do a discussion with your particular numbers, your dashboard or your financials. That's something I am offering right now. So if you'd like to reach out, feel free to reach out to me and we'll set up a time and I can go through this with you. No obligation, nothing else, just to give you some insight of what's going on with your business and give you some suggestions of what you can do. And of course, if you'd like to, learn more about what we do and how we do it, happy to share that with you. It is very enlightening when you do this. So if you'd like to take advantage of that, please reach out to me. Other than that, let me keep with the questions. Scott, does that help?
Yeah, I had one other kind of, I guess I'll call it a question.
Sure.
Kind of along that same.
Scott, does that help?
Yeah, I had one other kind of, I guess I'll call it a question.
Sure.
Kind of along that same avenue, have you ever looked at, I guess, the ratio of the NRV to total cost per visit as kind of a substitute for that?
So the net revenue and the total cost per visit?
Yeah, because I mean,
sure. It's just a microcosm of what I just said, right?
I just think the 3 by multiple, depending on which state you're in, I mean, it could vary wildly.
Well, yes, it does. But when I'm speaking with people, I'm like, so how much on average do you pay your therapist? 7,000. All right, well, let's take a look at how much revenue that your therapist is bringing in. They have an EMR, brings it up, boom. Yeah, this person's been bringing in about 17,000. You're losing money every month. Like, it allows you to see very quickly where the problem, and it allows you to determine that if you're hiring someone, let's say they want a little bit more money, and you're like, I really like this person. How do I know if I can really give them more money? Well, what would they have to see? Well, they're going to have to see 87% productivity. So sometimes I went, look, you're higher on the range. I really like you. I think you'll be a good fit. We're going to offer you this, and here's what we expect. And then I'm just clear on what the expectations are. Not that I necessarily make a higher expectations, but it just makes you more aware, but it's by no means the only thing you should be looking at, Scott.
And you said the higher performing clinics are closer to a 4 multiple?
No, I'm saying some of the more, yes, the more profitable clinics are higher. No, I'm saying some of the more, yes, the more profitable clinics are higher than 3.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. Carrie, in talking utilization, how does this change for folks who are hourly or only paid for time they are seeing someone? So that was the conversation we had before, because the utilization is a formula. So it's going to be based on your FTE status. It's going to be based on your work days. It's going to be based on your capacity. So because your capacity is going to be, let's say you did it after the month, you're going to artificially increase your utilization. So that is something that would have to be really, you dive in a little bit more with your coach and try to figure out some way to do it that's fair, that gives you an idea of what's going on. My guess is whether they're hourly, which is part-time, or salary, there needs to be an expectation of the hours you expect them to work. And then the job becomes how we can fill those hours. Because like I said before, if you have a therapist that can see 20 hours a week, but they're only seeing 10, yes, you're not, quote, losing money of what you're paying them, but you are losing potential 10 visits that they're not seeing for whatever reason. So my focus would be fixing why they aren't seeing those 10 visits and how we can increase that, because that's going to increase your income significantly and give you more opportunity to see more clients and help more clients. So hopefully that helps. Jeff, how do you count TPT students, third year, second year? Yeah, so here's my take on students. Count students. Students are a bonus. Love me some students. Give me a third year student. We should see some significant numbers. You know what students really do for me? Students let me know that if we had more providers, would our numbers change? Because the idea is this: if you offer more times, your numbers should grow. If you offer more, numbers should grow. Now, you could test that by paying someone and putting them in there. That's one way to test it. Or you test it by students. Third year comes in, is going to spend 12 weeks with you. You ramp them up pretty quickly. All of a sudden, your numbers start to go. And that third year, between the third year and the therapist, they got like a 1.5 times packed schedule. So what's that telling you? You might want to look to hire another person because you can fill it. So I use the third years as data of whether or not we could really fill and hire another therapist. Other than that, a great third year is just going to be a profitable quarter for you. But I do not put them in the FTE status because you are not paying them. All right. What is AR, Stacy? Accounts receivable, the amount of money that you are owed. Cash base. Cash base, Stacy, it's not going to apply. You better be collecting all your money ahead of time. All right. Okay, so thank you so much for those of you who were able to stay and those of you that be listening. Hopefully you got, oh, Steve, did you have a question?
Sorry
about that.
One of the things I wanted to know is most of my people are hourly, but it's hard for me unless we pay on a biweekly, but we're running schedules on a month. It doesn't always fall if I'm using my paycheck as far as number of hours of units to figure out the FTEs. Do you have a lot of people that run a bi-monthly pay period or bi-weekly? If I could see on a bi-monthly, it'd be easy to do.
Well, yeah. So bi-weekly, it's every other week, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would say that's probably the common
Yeah.
payment for most people, 26 pay periods.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is when I'm doing it bi-weekly, it won't necessarily match up for the month because the month has different things.
I'm having to do a lot of work in the background just to figure that up for the month because the month doesn't end on the end of the pay period. So I was trying to figure out, is there a better way, or do you know of a way that's easier that we can figure that?
Well, and what exactly you're trying to figure out, what particular metric?
Well, more the FTEs and the utilization because you're looking at on a monthly schedule. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So
Because everything I deal with is hourly, every one of mine.
It's tough because if I was looking at your business, I would say, based on the people you hired, what would you want and expect it to be? Like, and then compare it to what it is. So I would do a little research, a little data gathering. What is it and what do you want it to be and how big of that gap is? Because if that gap's really big, there's a lot of not just money that it's costing you, of opportunity, but it's costing you the ability to maybe rescheduling people properly, we're not filling in people properly, or maybe that it's really a marketing issue and you have the potential to grow, but you're not growing. This is opportunity cost. This is real money that could be coming in your business. Of course, these are people that you could be helping, but you're not. So I would look at it from that standpoint and see what that gap is. If the gap is narrow, then whatever you're doing is working. I mean, obviously try to make a little more efficient of getting the numbers, and maybe you can get one of your admin people to help you do that. But if there's a bigger gap, in my guess, I would think the gap would be a little bigger. That's a different question to answer. That's a different problem to have in saying, well, why aren't they more filled? Because we have the capacity to see more people and to help more people, but we're not.
I was just more talking about on my side of trying to figure that up, and then easier was you had a spreadsheet or something where you can do it on a daily, because I do have my hourly and I can go back on my paying periods and see hours, but again, that doesn't line up. So
yeah, what I would do in this, I don't have a spreadsheet. You're that dashboard, you're seeing the best I got. I mean, that's it.
Right.
I don't have much else. That's as technical as Jamey's going to get here. What I would do is I would find a billing person or an office administrator and saying, hey, here's what I've been doing. Here's what I ultimately want. Can you do this for me and try to make a better process that I'm doing and get me this information every month or whatever? Like I would dedicate that.
Yeah.
That's what I would do, but yeah.
Okay.
All right. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Obviously reach out if you have any more questions.
No problem.
All right, everybody. We went a little bit over. Hopefully it was worth it. You walked away with something. Thank you so much. We'll see you on our monthly webinar series. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.